The air was electric with tension as Jake Maxwell sprinted through the shadowy forest of Zithera, his lungs burning and heart hammering in his chest. The twin moons of Earth's distant future hung low on the horizon, their pale light reflecting off the smooth, crystalline surfaces of alien trees. Each step crackled against the bioluminescent moss that coated the forest floor, leaving a glowing trail in his wake, a trail his pursuers would have no trouble following. Behind him came the unmistakable sounds of the Zorathians' aliens that were part machine, part biological nightmare. Their guttural growls and the whine of their plasma rifles were like a predator's growl, pushing Jake forward even as exhaustion clawed at his body. He didn't dare glance back, he didn't need to. He could feel their presence, a palpable sense of menace closing the distance between them. "This is your fault, Jake," he muttered to himself between gasps of air. "Dad said not to go near the mountain. But no, you just had to explore." The memory of their morning hike flashed through his mind. His father, a retired military scientist, had been overly cautious about rumors surrounding Mount Sifra. The locals spoke of strange lights, whispers in the wind, and the occasional disappearance of foolhardy explorers. Jake had dismissed it as small-town superstition. But when they stumbled upon a sleek, alien structure buried in the mountain's side, the truth became undeniable. They hadn't had time to react before the Zorathians emerged. Gleaming black exoskeletons covered their elongated forms, their red eyes glowing like molten fire. The aliens had spoken in a guttural language Jake didn't understand, but their intent was clear: capture and kill. Jake's father had tried to distract them, shouting for Jake to run. And run he did, leaving behind the only family he had left. "Idiot," Jake hissed, vaulting over a fallen tree. His breath came in ragged bursts, his mind racing. He didn't have a plan, only the primal instinct to survive. Ahead, the forest began to thin, the ground sloping upward. A glimmer of hope sparked in Jake's chest. If he could reach higher ground, maybe he could lose them. But as he reached the crest of the hill, hope turned to dread. The cliff loomed ahead, its edge sharp and unforgiving. Beyond it lay a swirling vortex of light and energy, the Void Rift. The locals had warned of this too, describing it as a natural anomaly that disintegrated anything unfortunate enough to fall into it. No one who had entered the rift had ever returned. Jake skidded to a halt, pebbles scattering into the abyss. He turned, his back to the chasm, and saw the Zorathians emerge from the trees like hunters closing in for the kill. There were 3 of them, their insectoid limbs clicking against the ground as they approached. Plasma weapons hummed with lethal intent. Cornered, Jake muttered. "Great." He looked over the edge. The rift pulsed, its colors shifting between vibrant blues, fiery oranges, and deep purples. It seemed alive, calling to him, whispering promises of the unknown. "End of the line, human," one of the Zorathians snarled, its voice distorted and mechanical. Jake clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had no weapon, no escape route, no chance of surviving this encounter. But as he looked back at the rift, a strange calmness washed over him. If the aliens took him, he was as good as dead. At least the rift offered the possibility of something different. "Well," Jake said, forcing a grin he didn't feel, "if I'm going down, I'm taking my chances with the weird glowing death portal." Before the Zorathians could react, Jake took a deep breath and leapt backward into the rift. Time seemed to slow as he fell, the wind rushing past him. The last thing he saw was the shocked faces of his pursuers, their crimson eyes wide with disbelief. And then, the world dissolved into light. Jake's body felt weightless as he tumbled through the swirling energy. Colors and shapes danced around him, alien and incomprehensible. He felt no pain, no fear, only an overwhelming sense of being somewhere he was never meant to be. Then came the whispers, soft and melodic, wrapping around his consciousness like a lullaby. He couldn't understand the words, but they resonated deep within him, unlocking something he didn't know he had. The light grew brighter, and Jake lost all sense of time and space. When he finally hit solid ground, the impact knocked the breath out of him. He lay there for a moment, staring up at a cavern ceiling that shimmered with glowing crystals. He wasn't dead. But he wasn't on Earth anymore. As Jake struggled to his feet, he realized one thing with absolute certainty: whatever was waiting for him here, it was far beyond anything he could have imagined. Jake's eyes adjusted slowly to the glow of the cavern. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, like freshly cut grass. He staggered to his feet, feeling a peculiar lightness in his body, as if gravity here had forgotten to fully take hold. His surroundings were surreal, jagged crystalline formations pulsed with a soft light that seemed to respond to his movements. The cavern walls were smooth, almost polished, and faint lines of energy snaked across their surfaces, connecting the crystals in a pattern too complex to comprehend. What is this place?" he muttered, his voice echoing strangely. A flicker of movement caught his eye. He spun around, heart racing, but saw nothing. Then it happened again, a shadow flitting between the crystals. Jake clenched his fists, his instincts screaming at him to prepare for danger. Human. The word wasn't spoken aloud. It reverberated in his mind, a voice unlike any he'd ever heard. Ethereal and layered, it carried a weight of ancient wisdom and curiosity. Jake whipped around to face the source. Emerging from the shadows was a figure that defied simple description. Its form was humanoid but translucent, as though it were made of liquid starlight. Its skin shimmered with colors that shifted like an oil slick, and its eyes were orbs of swirling galaxies. Jake stumbled back, nearly tripping over a crystal outcrop. What are you?" "I am Seraphis," the being replied, its voice still resonating in Jake's mind. "Guardian of the Rift. And you are an anomaly." "Anomaly?" Jake asked, his pulse pounding. "What's that supposed to mean? Where am I? What happened to me?" Seraphis tilted its head, studying him with an intensity that made Jake squirm. "You fell into the Void Rift, a phenomenon that connects countless dimensions and timelines. Very few survive such an encounter. Fewer still emerge as you have, synchronized with the Rift's energy." Jake's gaze drifted to his hands. Faint lines of light now traced his veins, pulsing rhythmically. He hadn't noticed it before, but he felt different. Stronger. Clearer. The dull ache of exhaustion was gone, replaced by a strange vitality. "What do you mean, synchronized?" he asked, cautiously. "The rift does not destroy indiscriminately," Seraphis explained. "It examines, it tests. Those who fall into it are either consumed or enhanced. You have been chosen, human. The rift has awakened dormant potential within you, abilities tied to its energy. But be warned, such power is both a gift and a burden." Jake's mind raced. This had to be a dream or some hallucination brought on by the fall. Yet everything felt too real: the cool air, the soft hum of energy in the cavern, the piercing gaze of Seraphis. "My dad," Jake said suddenly. "The Zorathians, those aliens, they took him. They're trying to, I don't know, do something to Earth. I have to save him. I have to stop them." Seraphis's gaze deepened, as though peering into Jake's very soul. "The Zorathians are invaders who seek to exploit your world's latent rifts. If they succeed, they will destabilize Earth, leaving it vulnerable to collapse. You are correct to fear them, but you are not yet ready to confront them." "What do you mean?" "I don't have time for this." My dad dashed silence. Seraphis's voice was gentle but commanding. The cavern seemed to resonate with its words. "Your emotions are understandable, but without mastery of your newfound abilities, you will achieve nothing. I offer you a choice: remain here and learn, or return to your world as you are, to certain failure." Jake's fists clenched. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to act, to do something, anything, to save his father. But the logical part of his mind, the part that had always helped him in tight spots, understood the truth. He wasn't ready. Not yet. "How long would it take?" he asked reluctantly. "Time flows differently here," Seraphis said. What feels like months to you may pass as moments on Earth. Jake exhaled slowly, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought of his father, trapped and alone, but he also thought of the Zorathians and their advanced technology. Charging in blindly wouldn't save anyone. Fine, he said at last. I'll stay. But you'd better make it worth it. Seraphis nodded. Then we began. The days, or what Jake perceived as days, blurred together. Seraphis wasted no time, pushing Jake to his limits and beyond. The training was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced, blending physical, mental, and even spiritual disciplines. First, Jake learned to harness the rift's energy within him. The lines of light on his body weren't just decorative, they were conduits for the power now flowing through him. By focusing his mind, he could channel that energy outward, creating small bursts of force or manipulating objects at a distance. It is not strength you lack, but control, Seraphis said during one lesson. The rift's energy is vast, but without precision, it is as destructive to you as it is to your enemies. Jake's frustration grew as he struggled to focus, but over time, he began to understand. The energy wasn't something to be forced, it was a part of him, an extension of his will. Slowly, he learned to summon it with intent, shaping it into tools, shields, and even weapons. Beyond the physical, Seraphis taught Jake to see the threads of the multiverse. It was a skill that made his head ache at first, but with practice, Jake could sense faint ripples in the fabric of reality, glimpsing possible futures and hidden paths. One day, during a break in training, Jake sat by a pool of shimmering liquid that reflected not his face, but scenes of Earth. He saw his father in a containment pod, defiant but weakened. He saw Zorathian war machines lumbering across a ruined forest, their weapons charging with crackling energy. What's the point of all this if I can't stop them? Jake muttered bitterly. Seraphis appeared beside him, silent for a moment before speaking. Power is meaningless without purpose. The rift has chosen you not for what you are, but for what you can become. Trust in the process. Jake stared into the pool, his resolve hardening. He didn't fully understand the rift or why it had chosen him, but one thing was clear, he wasn't the same kid who had run into the forest that night. He was stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. And when the time came to return to Earth, the Zorathians wouldn't know what hit them. Jake stood at the edge of the rift's shimmering expanse, his heart pounding in his chest. The cavern around him seemed alive, its crystalline walls pulsing in rhythm with his thoughts. He was no longer the terrified boy who had stumbled into this place, desperate and powerless. Months, perhaps years of grueling training under Seraphis had transformed him. He wasn't just Jake Maxwell anymore, he was something more, someone attuned to the very essence of the rift. Seraphis hovered beside him, its radiant form dimmed slightly, as though conserving its energy for the coming task. You are ready, it said, its voice calm and steady. But readiness is not the same as certainty. Do you understand what lies ahead? Jake nodded, gripping the hilt of the rift blade at his side. The weapon hummed with energy, its translucent blade a swirling mass of pure rift essence. He had forged it himself, a test of both skill and will. It was an extension of him now, bound to his life force. They took my father, Jake said, his voice steady. They're trying to destroy my world. I don't need certainty, I need action. Seraphis regarded him with something resembling pride. Very well. The portal will take you back to Earth. Time there has passed more slowly, only days have gone by since you fell into the rift. The Zorathians are advancing. You must act decisively. Jake stepped forward, the weight of his mission settling on his shoulders. He glanced back at Seraphis, feeling a pang of gratitude. The enigmatic guardian had given him the tools to fight back, and though it was strange to think of it as a mentor, Seraphis had become just that. Thank you, Jake said simply. Seraphis inclined its head. Your journey is only beginning, Riftborn. With a deep breath, Jake plunged into the portal. The return to Earth, the transition was smoother than his fall into the rift. One moment, Jake was surrounded by swirling energy. The next, he was standing in the ruins of the Zorathian base near Mount Sifra. Smoke and ash filled the air, the acrid smell stinging his nostrils. The forest, once lush and alive, was now scarred with deep trenches and the smoldering remains of trees. Jake's hands tightened on the rift blade. The Zorathians' machines were here, towering constructs of dark metal bristling with weaponry. He could see them in the distance, moving methodically as they harvested energy from the mountain's natural rift fissures. Their goal was clear: extract the rift's power, destabilize the earth, and use the chaos to invade. Jake's heart ached at the destruction, but he forced himself to focus. He had a mission. First, find his father. Then, stop the Zorathians. The rescue mission. Jake moved like a shadow through the ruins, his rift-tuned senses guiding him. He could feel the energy flows of the Zorathian machinery, their power sources pulsing like beacons. As he approached a massive, central structure, a sleek, obsidian dome crackling with energy, he sensed his father's presence inside. Two Zorathian guards patrolled the entrance, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim light. Jake gripped the rift blade, calming his breathing. He trained for this. With a burst of speed, he charged, his movements almost too fast to track. The first guard barely had time to raise its weapon before Jake's blade sliced through its plasma rifle, rendering it useless. A quick twist and a surge of energy sent the alien sprawling to the ground, unconscious. The second guard lunged, its claws extending with a metallic screech. Jake parried the attack with a fluid motion, his blade glowing brighter as he poured his will into it. With a final, precise strike, he incapacitated the second guard. Jake didn't wait to catch his breath. He sprinted into the dome, his senses on high alert. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of machinery. A glowing containment pod stood in the center, surrounded by Zorathian scientists who were manipulating controls with their clawed appendages. Inside the PA. Step away from him. Jake's voice echoed through the chamber as he raised the rift blade. The scientists turned, their red eyes narrowing in surprise and then anger. One of them lunged for an alarm, but Jake was faster. He extended his free hand, channeling rift energy into a concussive wave that slammed the alien into a wall. The others hissed and charged, but Jake was ready. His blade moved in a blur, deflecting plasma bolts and striking with precision. Each movement felt instinctive, a culmination of his training with Seraphis. Within moments, the room was silent, the Zorathians either incapacitated or fleeing. Jake rushed to the containment pod, his heart pounding. He placed his hand on the control panel, feeling the rift's energy flow through him as he deciphered the alien interface. With a sharp hiss, the pod opened. "Dad!" Jake called, shaking his father gently. David Maxwell groaned, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw Jake, his expression shifted from confusion to relief. "Jake? You're alive? How did you dash?" "No time to explain," Jake said, helping him to his feet. "We have to move. Now." Confrontation with Vorlith. As they exited the dome, the ground shook violently. Jake turned to see a towering Zorathian figure emerge from the forest, flanked by an army of smaller soldiers. The figure was Vorlith, the Zorathian commander, its massive form adorned with jagged armor and glowing with dark energy. "You," Vorlith snarled, pointing a weapon similar to Jake's rift blade at him. "You are the anomaly who escaped the rift. Your existence is an insult to our kind." Jake stepped forward, pushing his father behind him. "And you're the invader who thought you could destroy my world." "Not happening." Vorlith laughed, a deep, guttural sound. "Foolish human. The rift's power is beyond your understanding. You cannot hope to challenge me." Jake tightened his grip on the rift blade. "Try me." The battle was explosive. Vorlith's strength was immense, his strike sending shockwaves through the air. But Jake's agility and control over the rift energy gave him an edge. The two clashed in a whirlwind of light and sound, their blades meeting in bursts of energy that lit up the darkened sky. As the fight wore on, Jake realized Vorlith was drawing power directly from the rift fissures. He had to end this quickly. Summoning every ounce of his strength, Jake channeled the rift's energy into his blade, its glow intensifying to blinding levels. With a final, desperate strike, he shattered Vorlith's weapon and drove him back. The alien stumbled, his energy faltering. Jake raised his blade for the finishing blow, but Vorlith snarled, retreating into the shadows with his remaining forces. "This isn't over, Riftborn," Vorlith spat before disappearing. Jake collapsed to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The forest was silent once more. The aftermath. As dawn broke over the ravaged landscape, Jake and his father stood together on the edge of the cliff where it had all begun. The rift fissures glowed faintly in the distance, their energy stabilizing now that the Zorathians' machines were destroyed. "You've changed, Jake," David said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Whatever happened to you in that place, it's made you into something incredible." Jake looked down at his hands, the faint lines of rift energy still visible beneath his skin. "I'm not sure what I am anymore," he admitted. "But I know one thing, the fight isn't over." As the sun rose, Jake turned away from the horizon, ready to face whatever came next. The rift had given him power, but it had also given him purpose. And he wasn't going to waste it. The sun rose over the ruins of the Zorathian incursion, casting long shadows across the forest that had once been vibrant and alive. Now, only scarred earth and the twisted remains of alien war machines stood as evidence of their presence. Jake Maxwell tightened the strap of his makeshift armor, a mix of human materials and scavenged alien tech. Beside him, his father, David, worked feverishly to decode a holographic map projected from a salvaged Zorathian tablet. "They're regrouping," David muttered, his brow furrowed. "From what I can tell, their primary base isn't far, maybe 20 clicks northeast. That's where they'll make their final push to extract rift energy." Jake nodded, gripping the rift blade at his side. Its glow was subdued now, but he could feel its latent power humming through his very core. He had spent the past hours meditating, recentering himself for what was to come. This battle wasn't just about saving Earth, it was about ensuring the Zorathians never had the chance to exploit the rift again. "They'll be expecting me," Jake said, his voice calm but resolute. "But they don't know what I'm capable of." David hesitated, glancing at his son. Jake wasn't the boy who had stumbled into this nightmare days ago. The rift had transformed him body, mind, and spirit. He was something else now, something powerful and unpredictable. "Just be careful, Jake," David said. "You're all I've got left." Jake smiled faintly. "I will, Dad. But I need you to do something for me." David raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Stay out of this fight," Jake said. "I'll handle it." Before David could protest, Jake turned and sprinted toward the northeast, his movements swift and silent. The rift's energy coursed through him, propelling him forward. There was no room for fear or doubt now. Only action. The Zorathian fortress, the Zorathian base, was a grotesque amalgamation of organic and mechanical components, its spires reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Energy crackled between pylons, creating a dome-like shield that pulsed with ominous light. Dozens of Zorathian soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their weapons primed and ready. Jake crouched behind a rocky outcrop, surveying the scene. His rift-enhanced senses picked up the faint hum of energy conduits buried beneath the ground, leading to a central core deep within the fortress. That core was the key. If he could disable it, the shield would fall, leaving the base vulnerable. Closing his eyes, Jake focused on the energy flows around him. He could feel the pulse of the rift within the fortress, like a second heartbeat. It guided him, showing him the weak points in the Zorathian defenses. He moved swiftly, a shadow among shadows. The first guard fell without a sound, Jake's blade slicing cleanly through its plasma rifle. The second guard barely had time to turn before a burst of energy from Jake's hand sent it sprawling. As he infiltrated deeper into the base, Jake encountered heavier resistance. Groups of Zorathian soldiers coordinated their attacks, forcing him to rely on every ounce of his training. His blade moved like a living thing, deflecting plasma bolts and striking with precision. When outnumbered, he unleashed concussive waves of rift energy, scattering his enemies like leaves in the wind. Finally, he reached the central core. It was a massive, glowing sphere suspended in a chamber of shifting light. Tendrils of energy snaked outward, connecting to the pylons that powered the shield. Jake approached cautiously, his blade at the ready. As he reached the control panel, the chamber shook violently. The air grew heavy, charged with dark energy. "I was hoping you'd come," a deep, guttural voice rumbled. Jake turned to see Vorlith emerge from the shadows, his hulking form radiating menace. The Zorathian commander was clad in upgraded armor, its surface bristling with alien runes that glowed with dark rift energy. In his hand was a weapon, a massive warhammer infused with the same malevolent power. "You escaped the rift," Vorlith said, his red eyes narrowing. "You wield its power, but you do not understand it. You are an abomination." Jake tightened his grip on the rift blade. "Funny. I was going to say the same about you." With a roar, Vorlith charged, his hammer crashing down with a force that shook the entire chamber. Jake dodged, the shockwave narrowly missing him. He countered with a slash of his blade, but Vorlith's armor absorbed the blow. The two clashed in a whirlwind of energy and steel, their weapons sparking with every collision. Vorlith's strength was immense, each strike of his hammer sending shockwaves that rattled Jake's bones. But Jake's agility and precision kept him in the fight, his movements a blur as he dodged, parried, and struck. "You cannot defeat me, child," Vorlith bellowed. "The rift's power belongs to the Zorathians." Jake smirked, his confidence unwavering. "The rift doesn't belong to anyone. It chooses." Channeling the energy within him, Jake unleashed a powerful surge that knocked Vorlith back. The commander snarled, his armor sparking and cracking. Jake seized the moment, darting forward and delivering a series of precise strikes. Each blow chipped away at Vorlith's defenses, until finally, with a roar of determination, Jake drove the rift blade into the core of Vorlith's armor. The Zorathian commander let out a guttural scream as his body was consumed by the very energy he sought to control. His form disintegrated, leaving only the echo of his fury behind. The final act. With Vorlith defeated, Jake turned his attention to the core. He placed his hands on the control panel, feeling the surge of energy coursing through it. He concentrated, using his connection to the rift to overload the core. The chamber began to quake as the energy conduits ruptured, one by one. Jake sprinted out of the fortress as explosions ripped through its structure. The shield collapsed, and the entire base crumbled in on itself, consumed by the power it had tried to exploit. As the dust settled, Jake stood on a hill overlooking the ruins. His father appeared moments later, breathless and wide-eyed. "You did it," David said, his voice filled with awe. Jake nodded, his expression solemn. "For now. But the Zorathians aren't the only ones who know about the rift. Others will come." David placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Then we'll be ready. Together." Jake looked toward the horizon, where the first rays of dawn broke through the smoke-filled sky. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The rift had given him power, but it had also given him a responsibility. And Jake Maxwell was ready to face whatever came next.